There's a driver out there somewhere right now who hasn't slept in his own house in 3 weeks. His wife made his side of the bed this morning out of habit. His pillow is sitting there, untouched. And yet, if you ask him where he sleeps best, where he actually falls asleep fastest and wakes up feeling most like himself, he'll tell you it's the truck. Not the house. Not the marriage bed. The truck. That sounds like it should be sad. And for some people in this industry, it is. But for a surprising number of drivers who've been doing this long enough, it's just the truth. A quiet, slightly uncomfortable truth that most of them have never said out loud to anyone. So why does an 8 by 10-foot box behind a diesel engine beat a real bedroom? Why does a space that costs $40,000 beat a home that cost $300,000? What does a truck have that a house doesn't? And what does the science of how humans bond with spaces actually say about why this happens? That's what this video is about. And I think by the end of it, you'll see that what looks like a trucker problem is actually a human problem. One that tells you something real about why any of us feel at home anywhere. What home actually means to your brain. Before we talk about the truck, we need to talk about what home is in the first place. Because most people think of home as a place, an address, a set of walls, a familiar smell when you walk through the door. But environmental psychologists have spent decades studying this, and their answer is more specific and more interesting than that. What your brain is actually tracking isn't the place. It's control. Research on place attachment, the psychological bond between a person and a physical space, consistently finds that the strongest emotional connections form when 3 things are present. You have habitual use of the space, you've personalized it in some way, and you feel like you're the one running it. Not just visiting, actually in charge of what happens there. Environmental psychologist Erwin Altman, one of the foundational researchers in this field, described territoriality as the human need to control a definable physical space, and found that when that control is present, people feel more secure, more competent, and more themselves. Take the control away, and the space stops feeling like home, regardless of how many years you've lived there or how much you paid for it. Think about that for a second, in the context of a trucker's actual life. His home, the real one with the address and the mortgage, is a place he shows up at for a few days every few weeks. He didn't choose the thermostat setting that's running while he's gone. He doesn't know what changed while he was out. Someone else cooked in his kitchen. His space, in a very real psychological sense, has been running without him. The truck, on the other hand, hasn't moved without him, hasn't changed without him, hasn't been touched by anyone he didn't invite. Every single thing in it is exactly where he put it, set exactly the way he wants it, because nobody else has been there to change any of it. The personalization that makes it real. Here's where it gets practical, because the psychological theory only means something when you see what drivers actually do with their cabs. The factory sleeper berth is not what experienced OTR drivers sleep in. Not really. What they sleep in is something they've spent months or years building on top of the factory setup, layer by layer, detail by detail, until the space does exactly what they need it to do. The mattress is usually the first thing that goes. Factory truck mattresses are thin foam slabs designed to meet a minimum standard, not to actually support someone sleeping on them for 300 nights a year. Veteran drivers replace them with memory foam or hybrid spring mattresses, ordered specifically for their cab dimensions, because every sleeper berth is slightly different, and a real mattress company will custom cut one to fit the exact width and length of your particular bunk. Some drivers report spending more time choosing their truck mattress than they ever spent choosing the one in their bedroom at home. Then comes the bedding, Same comforter they like, same pillow firmness they know works for their neck. Same blackout curtain configuration, rigged so that the specific light from a specific angle at their most common truck stops doesn't hit their face at 6 a.m. A small fan for white noise at the right pitch. A power inverter so their phone charges, and a mini fridge holds the food they actually want to eat. Photos go up. Sometimes a small rug on the floor of the berth, seat covers, a particular air freshener that became the smell of their space. Hooks and organizers in exactly the positions that make sense to them, not to a factory engineer, to them. Environmental psychologists have a name for this process. They call it personalization, and it's one of the primary mechanisms through which we convert a space into a territory. Research by organizational psychologists Graham Brown and Huiwen Zhu found that personalization is directly tied to psychological ownership, the internal feeling that this is mine, this is part of who I am. Once you've spent real time making a space reflect your preferences, your brain stops treating it as a place you're using and starts treating it as an extension of yourself. That's what a veteran driver's sleeper is. Not a place he sleeps, an extension of himself that happens to roll down the highway. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, the actual psychology behind decisions in this industry that most people never think to question, subscribe. We do this every single week. Let's keep going, because the next part is the one that surprised me the most while I was putting this together. Why the house sometimes loses. Here's the part nobody talks about in polite company. Ask a long-haul driver what it feels like to come home after 3 or 4 weeks on the road. Most of them will describe something warm. The kids, the wife, the real shower, the real food. That's all true. But underneath that, if you push a little, something else comes out. The house has changed while they were gone. Not dramatically, but the furniture got rearranged slightly. The pantry is organized differently than he'd have done it. The TV remote is on a different table. The bedroom feels like someone else's bedroom that he's sleeping in. Because, and this is the uncomfortable part, it kind of is. The house runs without him for 3 weeks at a time. It has to. And when he comes back, he's re-entering a space that adapted to his absence, rather than a space that kept waiting for him. His cab didn't do any of that. The cab is the one constant in a life built around constant motion. Every rest stop, every state, every weather system, every load, the inside of that cab stays exactly the same. The smell is his smell. The setup is his setup. Nobody touched it. Nobody reorganized it. It was sitting there, running on his terms. And when he climbs back in after a delivery, he slides into something familiar the way you slide into a well-worn jacket. There's a concept in environmental psychology called restorative environments, spaces that actively reduce stress and help the mind recover. Research going back decades has identified a consistent pattern. The most restorative spaces tend to be ones where a person feels a sense of fascination, escape from everyday demands, and being away. A private, controlled environment that moves through constantly changing scenery while staying internally stable hits all 3 of those markers in a way that a stationary home, full of shared decisions and other people's needs, often doesn't. I'm not saying the truck is better than home. I'm saying the truck is specifically, precisely designed, even if unintentionally, to meet a set of psychological needs that a shared family home, by its nature, cannot always provide. And for drivers who've spent years learning what their cab can do, that's not nothing. The $40,000 question. What they're actually buying. Let's put some real numbers on this, because the economics of what happens inside that sleeper are worth understanding. A proper sleeper berth setup, not a luxury custom unit, Just a well-kitted standard cab typically runs several $100s in meaningful upgrades beyond the factory spec. A custom-fit memory foam mattress might cost $400 to $800. A good APU for climate control, another couple thousand. Real bedding, a quality fan, lighting that doesn't strain your eyes at midnight, a mini fridge and small inverter. By the time an experienced driver has dialed in his setup, he's often put $3,000 to $5,000 into the sleeping area alone. And that's before you consider the truck itself. A new OTR sleeper cab runs $180,000 to $220,000 off the lot. A significant part of what justifies that price for the driver is the living space behind the cab doors. He's not just buying a machine that moves freight. He's buying a home that happens to haul freight. And the psychological value of that distinction is real and measurable in ways that show up directly in driver retention data. Carriers that provide quality sleeper environments see lower turnover than carriers that don't. Drivers who own their own truck and control their own setup report higher job satisfaction than company drivers in assigned equipment. These patterns exist because what happens in that cab after the wheels stop isn't separate from the job. It's the thing that makes the job sustainable for years at a stretch. The $40,000 sleeper isn't just a place to lie down. It's the reason some drivers can do this for 30 years, when others burn out in 18 months. So why does a trucker trust his $40,000 sleeper more than his own bedroom? Because the bedroom isn't fully his. It's shared, adapted, changed in his absence, subject to other people's decisions and other people's schedules. It's home, but it's a home he returns to, not a home he lives in continuously. The cab is fully his. Nothing in it moved while he was at the dock. Nothing changed while he was loading. It's the one space in a life of constant motion that stays completely, permanently, under his control. And the human brain responds to that kind of control the same way, whether you're a psychology researcher describing it in a paper, or a trucker who's never heard the term place attachment, but has spent 3 years building his cab into exactly what he needs it to be. Both of them are describing the same thing. Both of them call it home. If this one changed how you think about what that cab actually is, tell me in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the kind of thing we get into every week. The real psychology behind a life most people only see from the outside. Hit the button. I'll see you in the next one.